when you're out of town, represent your ground. Them niggas bleed just like us, showing where we come from. Queens, leaving niggas done, son.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to yet another video. Always feels like I'm saying at the beginning of the video, it's been a while since my last video, but I have not been slacking. I have been grinding very heavily, pause, on all of these college football videos, which will come out in a flurry, I believe. But I've been working harder, not smarter, really. I've been working on the same video for like a week now, rather than just, working on that and making these types of videos. But today, man, we got a team spotlight, the first of this series, college and NFL. But today it's going to be a college team. It's going to be the Texas Longhorns. Very boring team, right? No controversy here. Very bland. Not many talking points, right? Obviously. But let's get right into it, man, because I'm excited. My first team spotlight video, my first time talking about a college team. So let's get right into it. All right, man. Texas Longhorns, let's get into it. Before we talk about what they are right now and what I think they can be next season, we first have to look at what they were last season. And what they were last season was good. Obviously, with Texas, they're like the Cowboys in the NFL, right? Where no matter how good they do, they just get constant hate thrown at them. A lot of it's justified. Their fans are a little unreasonable. But if we're being objective here, and that's what this is, I have no favorites in college football. I've only been a fan of it for about a year. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding. If I don't have understanding, like here, I do a bunch of research and I find out things I don't know. So I'm coming at this from a very objective, not much bias involved here. I think Texas was good last season, especially considering how bad they've been in years past. They began the season unranked, obviously suffered that horrible 1 point loss to Bama. Ewers went down, kind of derailed their whole season as far as what they could have been, but they still got as high as 18th in the rankings, and they finished the season at 25. Their longest win streak was only 3 games. We'll get into that. I think that was what, really held them back. They weren't really to string together many in a row. And going into next season, I have Texas as my 16th best team in the country. And let's take a deeper dive into what they were last season. Let's start with that left-hand side and let's go game by game. So started off with the cupcake, UL Monroe. Not much to get into there. They dog walked them. That Bama game, man. How much would have changed if Texas beats Bama in that game? Obviously, I'm not in the business of saying if this guy stays healthy, they would have won this game, whatever, because I think we all know that. That doesn't need to be rehashed. You already have your own opinion if Quinn Ewers stays healthy, whether or not they win that game. But man, how crazy of a win would that have been? But it didn't happen. What did they do afterwards? Beat up on UTSA. Close loss to Texas Tech, man. And that's a string here. Let's zoom out a little bit. Take a look at their entire schedule from last season. Where's the blowout loss? Where's the gut-wrenching, just demoralizing defeat for Texas last season? There wasn't one. There were games where they were disappointing. You could point to that TCU game down there, only 10 points scored, but they didn't get blown out. They didn't get stomped in the game. They either won every game or lost every game by one possession. Or like that's very impressive. There are not many teams in the country that could have said that last season. Texas is one of them. Zooming back in, close loss to Texas Tech in week 4. That's not embarrassing. Some of you may not know how good Texas Tech is or was last season. That is not an embarrassing loss whatsoever. High scoring offense from both sides that game. Texas just did not come out with that one. Then they went on their longest streak of the season, 3 in a row, dominating West Virginia. That Oklahoma game, if y'all are not familiar with the circumstances of that game, that is probably, a very shocking score. But Oklahoma did not have Dylan Gabriel. They were throwing, Walmart employees at QB out there. It was bad. So not to take anything away from Texas, but that wasn't Oklahoma that they beat. That was I would compare it to, I don't even know, a D2 team that they were playing out there with no quarterback, no offense. Still, nonetheless, stomping of Oklahoma. Biggest margin of victory in the history of that rivalry, I believe. Very impressive. Then you had Iowa State, close win, squeaked that out, and then a loss to, at the time, a very good Oklahoma State team. Nothing to be ashamed of there. Still, and I mean, look at their last two losses now. Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. They score 30 plus and lose. That defense let them down in both games. Then, big win against Kansas State, the eventual Big 12 champions. Again, offense is rolling at this point, and then they lay an egg versus TCU. Well, not an egg, but offense didn't come to play. Defense showed up, really halted that pretty, impressive TCU offense from last season. Offense couldn't get it done, only puts up 10 points. That kind of killed the momentum. If they could have rattled off those last four regular season games, I think that would be a really different. If they would have knocked off TCU for sure, I feel like we'd be saying a lot different things about Texas at this point, but it didn't happen. Then they stomped Kansas, beat Baylor convincingly, lost uh, a bowl game against a very good Washington team. Nothing to be ashamed of there. So when we zoom out again, take a look at their season as a whole. Do you guys notice what I noticed? I noticed they played 5 teams in the top 15 last season. Only beat one of them. Say what you will about that. But they were tried and they were tested last season with an injury to their quarterback they sustained. I mean, how could you call last season a failure for Texas, considering the circumstances, considering who they had to play, considering the fact they didn't lose a single game by more than a touchdown? I have to look at last season and be impressed and think only positives for Texas. And let's look at the stats now, what they were as a team, the crux of that unit last season. A lot of these, not really anything to point out. I mean, I'll run through everything. Offense, about 430 yards a game, top 50, 35th to be exact. Nothing special, but it was a good offense. Passing yards per game, I think if Ewers stays healthy, this is a lot higher. Hudson Card was in there. We know they were a running football team, so 240 a game, 56 in the country. Nothing really impressive there. 188 rushing yards a game. We all know. Bijan, that's where they made their money last season. 36 in the country. Good rushing attack. Overall offense, even this is what impressed me, even with the injury to Ewers, 34 and a half points a game. That was top 25 in the country, man. And let's point out again, 34 points in a loss to Texas Tech, 34 points in a loss to Oklahoma State. That offense was humming a lot last season. Only about a sack and a half allowed per game. That was top 30. Pretty impressive there. I don't think many people gave a lot of credit to Texas' offensive line last season. Only 12 turnovers as well. That was, very impressive there. They didn't put the ball in their opponent's hands often. And then defensively, we already talked about how the defense let them down at times last season. 54th in yards given up, 91st in passing yards given up. They were not a good team against the pass last season. Solid against the run. That was the strength of this defense. I can say that confidently. And then 21.6 points a game. Very, very bend but don't break for Texas last season. And look at that margin of victory. Or that just the point differential, you can say. 34 points scored, 21 given up. Pretty solid. Top 28 as far as points given up. And then sacks per game, they didn't get after the quarterback enough. That's pretty obvious. 78th in the country, that's not going to cut it. Let's see from that team now who's no longer there. The key losses for Texas. Obviously, it starts with Bijan. Bijan was Texas last season, at least offensively. Their best player, most important player. They have to try and find a way to move on from Bijan, and they can't use a guy like Roshan Johnson to move on with. They lost their top two running backs. Just look at the stat. I mean, God, look at the stats there between them. Over 2,500 combined yards, 26 touchdowns, and nearly 400 touches. Guys, that is a massive hole left in your offense that you got to try and figure. I mean, if you lose that much production, you almost have to change your entire offensive philosophy if you're Texas, because that is just a massive loss there. And then let's look, I already mentioned they were good against the run last season. Well, let's look here at 4 of their front 7 lost to the NFL. Well, OV Ogafo transferred to LSU, but Moro Jomo, Keandre Coburn, and Demarion Overshone all lost to the NFL. Moro and Keandre, interior defensive linemen, didn't get after the quarterback a whole lot. Still respectable sack numbers, but they were guys that stuffed the run. I mean, let's look at these 4 linebacker and defensive linemen here. How many tackles for a loss are you losing there? 17 and a half, 23, 27 tackles for a loss between these 4 guys. That is tough. That is tough to overcome. DeMarvion Overshone, I'd call him the leader of this defense last season. Losing him, that's tough. That is very tough. Also had 4 sacks himself. So possibly something to look out for. Texas being good against the run last season, losing these 4 guys, that may be more difficult. And then you look at 2 DBs, 12 passes defended between the 2 of them, but they weren't very good against the pass. So how big of losses will these 2 be? We'll see. Moving on to their key offensive players. These are the guys that is going to be tasked with the duty of reinventing Texas's offense. Obviously, we got Quinn Ewers. You know, there are a lot of question marks about Quinn Ewers still, and I don't really know why. I feel like we know who he is. I think he's a good quarterback. Potential to be a very good quarterback if Texas can utilize their weapons that they have. Texas is no longer going to be a running team. You do not go from Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson over 2,500 yards, 26 touchdowns combined to what they have now. Jonathan Brooks, Keelan Robinson. They didn't bring anybody in from the transfer portal at the running back position. These are the guys. One of these 2 guys is going to be the number 1 back. Others going to be the number 2 back. I mean, Keelan Robinson, he didn't even have 100 rushing yards last season. And then Jonathan Brooks, I mean, 32 touches. I mean, that's not these guys. I don't think they're going to be able to even run the ball like they did last season. Let's go back a little bit. 188 rushing yards a game last season. I'd wager, I don't even know if they're going to get to 150 next season. I really believe that Texas is going to go from a run the ball offense to really, airing it out almost exclusively, because just look at the 77 touches. That's what their running backs had last season. Are those guys going to really, pound the rock every play? I doubt it. You look at Kelvin Banks, second team All Big 12 in his first season, I believe. Very impressive guy there. He is a guy getting a lot of hype as possibly one of the best young offensive linemen in the country. But let's get into the main thing about this Texas team. Their strongest position group, without a doubt, wide receiver. Xavier Worthy, obviously, getting a lot of hype. He is their number 1. I mean, Jordan Whittington, this is his 5th year, I believe. He's been there for a while. But both big guys, over 6 feet tall. Jatavion Sanders, first season with the Longhorns, over 50 catches, over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. Not a lot of people are talking about him. I didn't even know about him until I did research for this video. And then getting Isaiah Nayer back. Well, I shouldn't say getting him back. He's never played a game. Missed all of last season with a devastating injury. Coming from Wyoming, that's what he did in 2021. Over 900 yards, 13 touchdowns, over 20 yards a catch. He was a monster at Wyoming. And if they can figure out a way to use him, include him, a lot of people are talking about A.D. Mitchell as like their big get. Quite frankly, I don't see it. I don't see the hype. If you ask me, he's going to be their 5th leading receiver this season. Not, no disrespect to A.D. Mitchell, but look at those 4 guys I have above him. How many of those guys is he better than? Maybe Jordan Whittington, but even then, I mean, he has the experience of being there, being in that offense. So I don't think A.D. Mitchell is going to make a huge impact next season, but that's not to say that he's not a bad player. I mean, just look at who's above him. So these are the guys that I think are going to carry the load for Texas this season. Let's talk about the depth, man. How many teams are 5 deep at pass catcher? And any of those 5 can really go off in a game. I feel like any of these 5 guys I just showed you right here could have a 100-yard game next season. I don't know how many teams could say that. And, we talk about depth with this Texas team because they've dealt with injuries. So it's very important to have, a number of guys who can go out and get it any given game. So that is the strength of this team. their wide receiver group. Let's get into the defense. First off, Jalen Ford. Let's look at what he did last season. 119 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 4 picks, 3 forced fumbles. The guy was everywhere. Uh, I didn't know about him before this video. Definitely gonna have an eye on him next season. He was a freak last year. Diamante Dorsey, uh, another linebacker there, 44 tackles. Expect his role to increase, you could say, after the loss of Ovi and DeMarvian Overshown. Baron Soro, he was their sack leader last season. Very important that he comes back. 5.5 last season. They need more from him. Also had 9 tackles for loss. Like I said, a team that did not get after the quarterback enough last season. And let's look at their DBs, man. Really the strength of their team. I mean, Jaron Thompson, 83 tackles, 7 passes defended. Jade Barron, yes, you read that right. 11.5 tackles for a loss for a DB. There are some of the top linemen in the country that didn't get 11.5 tackles for a loss. So that was really impressive when I read that. Ryan Watts, 51 tackles, 3 passes defended last season. And 2 transfers. Gavin Holmes first from Wake Forest. Let's look at this. 9 passes defended in just 11 games. And then Jalen Catalon, he has only played 7 games these last 2 seasons, just riddled with injuries. But I mean, 2 years ago, 2021, in just 6 games, look at that. 2 passes defended, 2 picks, 46 tackles in just 6 games. In 2020, he had like nearly 100 tackles, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a big get. And the big thing about this secondary is experience. I mentioned how they were very bad against the pass last season. I expect that to change because you got a lot of experienced DBs here. And I feel like Texas is going to be a team with that offense playing with the lead a lot. So they could force, the other teams to play catch up here. And I feel like they have the talent in the secondary to force a lot of turnovers, something they didn't do a great job of last season. So keep an eye on that. And let's get into the expectations here. And, just scenarios, I'm not in the business of pushing the Texas hype train or anything like that or shitting on Texas or whatever. These are just what I think are the three of many. I'm not going to go through the whole multiverse of realities for Texas, but 3 scenarios I think could be very reasonable next season. Worst case scenario. Offense cannot function without Bijan, without Roshan Johnson. Quinn Ewers either cannot shake the injury, bad juju he's had, or he just doesn't step at the plate. He turns the ball over a lot. He's just not that guy. The wide receiver room doesn't click for whatever reason. Ewers can't get them the ball. They do not live up to the on-paper hype they have. Defense, they can't recover from the loss in their front 7. They can't stop the run and can continue to not stop the pass. Bama just spanks them week 2. Oklahoma wins the Red River game, and they just drop multiple conference games. With that being said, 8-4, same as last season. I think that is the floor. I don't see a world where this team, the best roster in the Big 12, where they lose more than 4 games. I think for the Texas haters, yeah, I guess you could just pencil in the Bama game as a loss, right? In Tuscaloosa, I get it. Missed the Big 12 championship game. Obviously wouldn't make a New Year's 6 bowl game. That's the worst case, which still, I mean, back-to-back 8-win seasons for Texas, excluding whatever bowl game they would play. A lot of people would be hating on that, but still, I mean, you're a good team, man. Think about all the just horrible horrible programs you could say in college right now. For Texas to win back-to-back 8-win seasons going into the SEC, that would not be the worst thing in the world. But it is their worst case scenario, I believe. Middle ground here, more realistic, offense shifts to a pass heavy system. Whether or not they adjust that well, we will see. Brooks and Robinson shoulder the rushing load. Not, obviously not recreating what Bijan and Roshan did last season, but, respectable run game put together. Receiver talent shines through. They don't live up to the hype necessarily, but they show you why they are being rated so highly by everybody. Ewers shows positive growth, stays healthy. That's all you can ask for. Defense improves against the pass. Maybe they regress against the run a little bit, but obviously a lot of room for improvement against the pass for the Longhorns. Alabama game is a toss-up. Whether or not you think they win it, they're competitive. It boosts their morale, win or loss. and they control the Big 12. They don't, they don't lose any gimmies, similar to last season, you could say. They don't suffer any blowout losses. They're competitive every game and they win the majority. 9-3 record, I think, make the Big 12 championship and finish the season rated in the top 12 to 15. Respectable season. A lot of positive energy, you could say, surrounding the Longhorns. Probably win 10 games if they win their bowl game. A lot of hype going into the SEC. This would be a good season. If anybody hated on this season for Texas, it would just make it very obvious they're not in the business of reality. They're just in the business of shitting on Texas, win or loss. And then lightning in a bottle. Everything goes right for Texas. Offense becomes top 5 in the country. Ewers lights it up. He balls out, he gets the Heisman hype, and he utilizes those receivers. The running game complements their passing game. Nothing spectacular, but the yards per carry is up there, and they get the much needed, fourth and shorts, third and shorts. Defense improves across the board, forces turnovers. That's what I think is going to be the key for them. Texas beats Bama in Tuscaloosa. Red River is a cakewalk yet again, and the Big 12 cannot compete with Texas's roster. That would result in a 12-1 record, win the Big 12 championship. Big 12 championships. I meant to say Big 12 champions. And honestly, they would have a good shot, a very good shot at making the college football playoffs, and then who the hell knows what would happen there. Let's see what I think. I've laid out the scenarios. Let's get into what I think is going to happen next season. Game by game, in-depth prediction. Week 1, they're playing Rice. Let's not kid ourselves here. That will be a bloodbath. Texas dominates, a tune-up game to get ready for possibly, maybe I'm overhyping this, possibly the biggest game of the season next year in week 2. Texas versus Alabama. I got Texas winning. I got Texas winning as it stands right now. And if you look there on the left, that's what I think their ranking would be. In my opinion, I think they'll start middle of the pack, around 15 by the time they play Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Guys, let me just set it up for you. Let me set it up for you. Texas was worse last year than they were this year. Bama was better last year than they will be this year. Texas lost by 1 point. I understand home field plays a big part in that, shifting from Texas to Alabama. But still, Texas got better, Bama got worse. I got Texas taking this game. If you got Bama taking that game, that's perfectly fine, perfectly reasonable. But if you are out there and you think there is just not a shot Texas beats Bama, you are sorely mistaken. And I would not, bet any money if I were you, because you do not have the right state of mind for that game. The fallout of that would be Texas jumping into the top 10, dominating their next 2 games, in my opinion. Offense showing up, showing out against Wyoming, Isaiah Nayer's former team, and Baylor. I think they pick up both those games very easily. They are riding high. The hype train is out of this world. Everybody is predicting that they finish in the college football playoffs. And then what happens? I got them dropping a game to Texas, man. Or not Texas, to Kansas. I am on the Kansas hype train more than the Texas hype train. And look, let me be honest here. I think the only way you beat Texas next season is if Texas's offense just completely shits the bed and turns it over multiple times, or you got a game like this where I think Kansas, Jalen Daniels returning, high-powered offense, believe it or not, in Kansas. They beat Texas 2 years ago. This is not out of the realm of possibility. I think there is a very strong chance a team like Kansas just outscores Texas. Straight up, head-to-head, they come out on top. Field goal, bounce of a ball, turnover goes one way. I think Kansas could very easily beat Texas in week 5, possibly because they're overlooking Kansas to that Oklahoma game. I think that could be another factor involved there. I do think Texas, though, beats Oklahoma back-to-back years. I'm not sure if Oklahoma did beat Texas 2 years ago. I think that was the Caleb Williams game. So back-to-back wins for Texas in that rivalry. After that, I think they dominate both of the new additions to the Big 12, Houston, BYU. Not really anything, to be afraid of there, if you ask me. I think the offense, at this point, I think the offense is on a roll. I think they're, top 10 in the country. explosive, lighting everybody up. Then defending Big 12 champs, Kansas State. Texas beat Kansas State last year. I think it goes the other way this time. Again, Texas back 10 or back in the top 10 rankings at this point. I haven't predicted their offense dropping the ball yet. In this prediction, I think it happens against Kansas State. Kansas State, I mean, they've added a lot of players. They've lost a couple, lost Deuce Vaughn, the NFL, lost Adrian Martinez, but I think, don't overlook Kansas State, man. They are the defending Big 12 champions for a reason. I think that's going to be a tough game. Win or loss, it's going to be close. I do have Kansas State pulling that one out, though. And let the memes roll in of the state of Kansas owning Texas this season. Moving on, though, I think they close out the season fairly easily. Let me not overlook. So, TCU, not a look. They beat Texas last season. They beat Texas last year, but TCU, they lost so much, man. Lost their quarterback, running back, two of their receivers, offensive coordinator, man. I don't know how you bounce back from that in one season. And then Texas Tech, we point out, they beat Texas last season. Yet again, I think a very high scoring game, but I think Texas gets the better of them this go around. And then Iowa State, bad last season. I don't think they really compete. So you look at the regular season for Texas, 10-2, a win over Alabama. Guys, that determines Texas' entire season, man. I think if they beat Bama, the momentum is out of this world, the hype's out of this world, and it powers them in their offense to another gear. But I mean, I still have them losing the trap game at Kansas. I don't know if it's at Kansas, against Kansas, you could say. Like I mentioned, overlooking possibly to Oklahoma, not giving Kansas the 100%, and Kansas makes them pay for it. And then Kansas State, defending Big 12 champs, talented team, possibly the best Big 12 team outside of Texas. And getting into that, I do think they will rematch in the Big 12 championship, and I do think Texas will get it back in blood, per se, against Kansas State. A close one for sure, but I do have Texas pulling it out. At this point, Texas would be in the top 7, top 8. You'll have a couple people, begging for them to get into the college football playoff. I don't think it would happen, but certainly they would make a New Year's Six game. Who the hell knows who they play? I'd say LSU here just because, why not? And I have Texas beating LSU. What would that mean? This is my official prediction. A 12-2 record for Texas, the champions of the Big 12. A New Year's Six appearance and finishing the season probably ranked in the number 5 spot. Is that wild? I don't know. You guys tell me. This is my second year, really, heavily following college football. Am I overlooking the historic blunders of Texas? Do they fumble when they have everything going for them? Are they not capable of putting together a string of success like this? And even still here, I don't have them winning 8 straight games, 7 straight games. I got 4, 3, and then I guess you could say 5 at the end of the year. I don't have them, running off 8, 9 straight. I just think their offense is going to be, I mean, honestly, I think they're going to have the best offense in every game they play next season. Pretty easily, to be honest. But I do think that defense, it's not top 10, it's not top 20. It's going to have its flaws. I think they're going to get into a lot of shootouts next season. They'll win most of them, in my opinion, but they will drop a couple. That offense is liable to turn it over a little bit, even though they didn't do it much last season. They're liable to lay an egg or two. I have them losing 2 conference games, but man, it's not a difficult schedule. The Big 12 is pretty weak. Texas has the best roster on paper. If you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong without hating Texas. Use logic, use facts. Tell me that I'm hyping up a player that isn't that good. Tell me that I'm overlooking a problem that they had last season. Don't just say Texas sucks. They're not winning 12 games. Prove it. Use logic and reasoning to tell me why I'm wrong, and then I can respect that. But honestly, guys, this is all for discourse. This is all for interaction. I do honestly believe Texas is going to finish 12-2 next season. That is my prediction. But tell me yours. I want to know. I'm new to this college football thing. Let me know what you guys think about Texas because I really want to know. With that being said, that is the end of this video, guys. I think this went really well. I am really excited to do more teams. You guys can vote on the next one. That poll will be up soon. And thanks for watching. Honestly, I'm really happy we're at 100 subscribers, and the push starts for 200. 200 starts now. I'm very excited for more original content, and be on the lookout for more. I really appreciate it, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and
It's out the motherfucking pack. Right out the niggas don't know how to act.